In this video, we'll explore the classification of data, including the types of sources of data collection. As well as that, we will take a look at the advantages and disadvantages of both grouped and ungrouped data. We previously, in the last video, took a look at what raw data is. This is any data that has just been collected but not yet processed. If you are unfamiliar with any of these terms, be sure to check out the previous video. I'll link it in the video's description. We also determined how raw data could be split into either quantitative or qualitative data. This comes under the types of data category. This time we are going to determine the sources of data. The first source we are going to cover is primary data, whilst the latter will be secondary data. The definition for primary data is any data collected by yourself or on your behalf. This means if you were to survey everyone in your class, regardless of the topic, the resultant data would be primary data. Plenty of methods, including questionnaires, interviews, and fieldwork, can be used to obtain primary data. We even mentioned surveys earlier. On the other hand, secondary data is any data collected externally by someone else. This can be gathered using newspapers, magazines, websites, etc., etc. For example, the ONS, the Office for National Statistics, regularly publishes government data, and Ofqual, responsible for our exams, also publishes statistics regarding the exams. These are all examples of secondary data. The next thing we'll take a look at are the advantages and disadvantages of both primary and secondary data. We'll start with primary data. Some benefits of primary data is how specific your investigation can be for your hypothesis. We'll cover this in another video, but a hypothesis is essentially a prediction that we try to validate with evidence. I want to find out if blue-colored notebooks give higher attention than other colors for a 16-year-old. As far as I'm aware, there's nothing online regarding this data. Primary data will allow us to carry out this investigation because we are collecting it. The second advantage of primary data is the reliability. You are in control of exactly what you collect, and you'd hopefully trust yourself rather than a random stranger to collect some quality data. There are some drawbacks though. One of the big ones is the fact that it is time consuming. Suppose I want to know the screen time of every person in the UK. I highly doubt anyone has the time for that, and it also leads to the next point. Quite often, the collection process is just impractical. The example I gave earlier, not only will you need a huge checklist, but people may refuse to answer you. It could also mean you miss a lot of people out. And once again, the next point already explained, is going to be expensive. In the modern world, money is time. Right, moving to secondary data, the positives include the cheapness and convenience of obtaining the data. The data in some cases could actually be more accurate than your own. Your neighbor will, or has to, tell the government how much they earn truthfully. You, according to you, they can claim they're millionaires, maybe because I hate you. The potential disadvantages are very significant and unfortunately common. The data could be outdated, sometimes by months or even years. Secondly, it could be unreliable. I certainly wouldn't trust a 7-year-old to collect data on GCSEs. They won't even know what it is. Lastly, the data could just be not the data you need. Maybe you need number of hat-tricks scored by Ronaldo, but you can only find the goals he scored, so that won't be helpful. That is all the primary and secondary data. We'll now cover grouped and ungrouped data. At the top right of the screen, we have a calculator. I'm going to type in this prompt here. If you're using the old Casio calculators, this can be done by pressing alpha, then full stop at the bottom. This achieves the #int hashtag part. Then place your starting number and press shift, then the right bracket to get the comma. Finish by entering the ending point, then close the bracket. I chose 1 and 100. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the new calculators, so you'll have to play around or watch a tutorial to do this. What this does is generate random numbers between 1 and 100. When I finally typed this in, my first random number was 58. Then it was 66, 94, 3, 57, 91, and so on. We call this individual raw data ungrouped. As we can see, every value is itself. I did this a few more times, 100 to be exact, and I put it into this table here. We'll see what the table actually is in more detail later. If the number was between 1 and 20, I incremented, meaning adding 1, to the frequency. For 1 to 20, it happened 16 times. For 21 to 40, 21 times, and so on. This is what we call grouped data. Just a bit of a random fact, but it could come in useful. The class intervals, which means each row in the left column circled, are non-overlapping. Common sense, but they also don't have to be equal. In fact, for data very close together, it makes sense to have smaller groups. It helps to see the distribution in more detail, and vice versa for larger groups. Let's look at the pros and cons now. For ungrouped data, we have the benefit of being able to see the exact data values, as we saw in the last example. If your dataset is small, you might want to consider this, as the complexity really only applies to larger ones. Lastly, no data is lost, a huge advantage in calculations as you're doing stats, probably GCSE maths as well. Sometimes you have to calculate estimates relating to group data. Having your data ungrouped will increase accuracy. It does, however, become hard to interpret for larger datasets. Imagine having the whole of the UK's population's ages on a spreadsheet. Not pleasant. It would be difficult to spot trends. Take the ages that is mentioned. That's an extreme example, but within an hour you'll give up trying to spot patterns. It just isn't feasible. For group data, interpretation as well as the presentation becomes much easier. Think of it as simplifying in a way. As a result of the simplification, it naturally becomes easier to spot trends. The table with random numbers earlier, we could easily see how the frequency changes. One new concept is the ability to represent continuous data. This is a term covered in a previous video, and if you want to recap, visit the video's description below. Now, for the disadvantages, as we don't have the exact data values anymore, the accuracy is lost. In the table yet again, you will know how many were between 1 and 20, but not what each number was. When or if you complete calculations such as a mean, the accuracy, as we call it, is lost, so it becomes an estimate. Finally, there is a possibility of the data being misrepresented through intent or just poor knowledge. Continuous data can take any value on a numerical scale. I know I'm saying it again, but there is a more detailed video in the description. An example of an age, let's take 25 years. Well, that isn't it. It could be 25 years and 8 months. Not enough? How about 25 years, 8 months, and 5 days? As you can see, I can be more specific. Pointless, yes, but specific. As a result, age will always be continuous. This table should look familiar. It's the one where I put my random number values. We've actually covered it quite well so far, but let's state the obvious. This is called a grouped frequency table. I'm sure you can decipher that. The groups of numbers, along with the frequency, naturally give its name. This one's for discrete data, but bear in mind the group can also take on continuous data. 10 runners run in an 100-meter race. Their times are shown below. By the way, this isn't a question, just an explanation. We have what we call a grouped continuous frequency table. Just call it a grouped frequency table. It sounds ridiculous. The left-hand side column has equal intervals of 2, 8 to 10, 10 to 12, and 12 to 14. I'm going to choose 10 to 12, this one, to explore in more detail. Now, time is continuous. If I ran a time of 10.01 seconds, on this scale it will be here. However, as there are infinitely possible values, this is a rounded figure. I should point out that this is allowed. I'm just highlighting why the table is more widely used. So, to be more clear, let's do another example. Take my friend for instance, who ran in 11.4328 seconds, but he actually didn't run it in that time. It would actually go on forever. If you had to list all of the times without rounding, it would be impossible. To fix this, what we can do is place the times into a group. Here, 10 to 12, to demonstrate that my time is between 10 and 12 seconds. Of course, it carries the inaccuracies we saw of group data, but is more useful since we can analyze the data. From here, we will take a look at some exam questions. Pause the video, have a go, then check back with your answers. John is going to collect data on the ages of those who visit the local cafe. The data collected is primary data. Explain why. So we've been told it is primary, but why? Remember from the definition that primary data is any data collected by yourself. John is asking questions himself, so that means we can put that as the answer. Tom records the number of books his students read last month. Is the data grouped or ungrouped? I can see each individual data containing the number of books, so this will be ungrouped data. For part B, the question asks for a format Tom could use to group the data. We earlier used the grouped frequency table, and we can do the same thing here, so that's all I'm going to put. For part C, an advantage of grouping data is being able to spot trends more easily. For part D, a disadvantage, however, is the loss of accuracy. You may have put a different point, and anything from the table will be correct. So if you put that, you can give yourself the mark. So there we have it. We've covered all of primary, secondary, grouped and ungrouped data. If you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and leave any questions in the comments section below. And lastly, thanks for watching this video.